Okay, here we are. Hello, Mary. How are you?
Hey, Kelly, doing great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be back here doing this
Yes.
podcast with you and the channel.
Yes. Honored, thrilled.
Awesome. So I know we wanted to start with maybe kind of recapping a little bit of my experience with channeling from last week, not last week, last episode.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago in April as well. So yeah, I don't know specifically kind of what feedback you got as a result of that, but I know some people maybe reached out or asked some questions.
I'll share with you, just
Yeah.
one listener was especially taken with your courage to not only try channeling, but to try it while recording for the first time. Like, there you did. And a big part of what I share with individuals is just having that willingness, having that curiosity, and you exemplified that. So I think there's curiosity in knowing, like, how did it feel? Has anything transpired since then?
Okay, yeah. It felt I was a little nervous, and I did cut out some of the lag time in post production because
Okay, that's fair.
there was a little bit of me waiting,
Like-
dead air while I waited for sort of the voice to come in. But yeah, it was exciting. Like I said, I was a little nervous, and there was sort of what is this that I'm feeling? But it did feel a little different than my own voice, and it felt like once I got in a groove with it, you kind of prompted me with a question, and then I was able to just kind of let it flow. And once it flowed, it felt very much more natural. It was like kind of getting started,
Yeah,
like getting
sure.
a car started.
Sure,
like,
sure.
what's
Or a
happening?
lawnmower.
Yeah, cranking it,
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
And then since then, I have practiced a little on my own.
Good.
Speaking out loud and then responding out loud. And I feel like I've
Beautiful.
gotten a little better. It would maybe seem a little crazy to an outsider to hear me walking around talking to myself, is what it sounds like.
Two aspects, yes. Good for you,
But that's
though.
been fun, yeah, to do that.
Good. I celebrate that with you.
Yeah. So if anybody does, want to kind of follow last episode and try it
Right.
at home, then yeah, I would encourage them to do so.
I do too, and I'll just share briefly. It's unusual, I've come to recognize in my line of work, to be completely self-taught. And I think that's given me permission to just explore things in a unique way instead of trying to fit into a certain format or a certain cookie cutter
Yeah.
approach. So I just say again, if someone feels inclined, if it's something they're particularly curious about, to just try, working with those illuminated presence, such as channel groups, they're so eager to help and glad to have a platform and a place to give their messages. So I think most people might find it a little easier than they would expect.
Yeah, I would agree. And I really deeply feel that there are guides that want to help us. And we did touch on that a little bit in the last episode.
Yes.
There's a lot of benevolent entities that really just want to
Yeah.
help humans connect, and not just through channeling, but through signs and symbols and synchronicities.
Writing, inspired writing,
journaling,
music, exactly.
Yeah, all of that. So,
Benevolent beings, yes.
so we should use them. We should utilize their help, because I think they really do want to help. So
And the way I look at that is we're helper beings, right? We know so many people like, oh, how can I help you? So, because we think, well, I don't want to bother them, or maybe what I have to say isn't as important as someone else. But just like we would be eager to help other people, I think there are so many beings that are eager to help us because we aspire to help people. So they're there and ready for the call.
that makes sense. Love it. Well, are you ready to get into channeling today?
Absolutely.
A list of questions.
Yes. Greetings, dear one. We are so grateful again for this opportunity to sit with you, to share messages, to offer our inspiration, our insights regarding these fascinating questions that you have put together. And we know going forward that individuals will be, after listening to the episodes, are submitting questions. Some have already submitted questions and topics that they wish to have covered. And we welcome taking on any and all topics that feel appropriate to you, dear one.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be able to talk to you again. I really appreciate you agreeing to this format. So
We feel privileged to do so.
awesome. So let's get into it. So you may recall last time we talked a lot about good and evil and absolute evil versus absolute good. And we sort of had this spin-off topic about the nature of love and whether it's a duality or a non-duality. And we kind of wrestled with it a little bit and came to the conclusion that love really isn't a duality. And that has sparked a couple follow-up questions from listeners.
Perfect.
We've had some suggestions about maybe what is the opposite of love, because that's where we started. It was like I had said, some people say the opposite of love is hate, but that really within hate is contained love, because you have to have a certain passion to feel hate. And so we resolved that, no, hate isn't the opposite of love. Love has no opposite. But we've had a few people suggest what might be the opposite of love, so I'd love your feedback on those things.
Well, we have to just start with the bold statement in saying that we could not imagine anything being the opposite of love, dear one, right? Love is that ever-expanding, ever-expressive vehicle, if you will, for life itself. And these concepts can be difficult to put into a rather limited English language, but not entirely impossible. But within every aspect of life, be that an acorn, be that a human, be that a cloud in the sky, there is this vibrancy of life itself. And within that understanding of life itself, love is the driving force, we would say. And if you say, well, what if someone dies, then they can't express love anymore? Just using that as an example, and we're glad for you to present others if they come to you. Well, that's not true either. How many individuals, when they've lost a loved one to death, when they've transitioned, they can still feel their presence. They can still feel quite literally their love and support. So we can't see any aspect of life. We can't envision or consider any place in all of the universes where love does not exist, or there would be an opposite of that, dear one. People can feel as though, like, I hate or I disagree and I don't love you. But as you have spoken to here, where there is passion, where there is an energetic spark, within that, the very center of that is still the essence of love that might be misconstrued, misconceived, but not absent.
Makes sense. Like a love gone wrong, but still love.
Right.
So let me start with one of the first propositions, which was that God is love, and so the opposite of love is the absence of God.
Right.
And I responded to that person with the other proposition that if God is omnipresent, then there would be nowhere where God is absent, so that maybe that sort of proves that love is non-dual. Can you speak to that? Or
Yes. And it's very interesting that quite often humans, understandably so, will assign the concept of God human attributes, right? I'm either here or I'm there, right? But when you look at an omnipresent essence, right, how we could expand our understanding of the concept of the divine, it is beyond human attributes, beyond human characteristics. So there is no limit to where that presence can be, any more than there is no limit to where love actually abides. And many would consider that the essence of the divine, the energy of God, would be ever prevalent, right? Pervasive everywhere, just like love is. So some find comfort in thinking God loves me, I love God, I am connected to that. Or when they envision or imagine their loved ones on the other side, they're in the presence of God. Many, for example, that have died and died and come back to share their experience will speak about the prevalence of unconditional love. So whether or not they had a personal experience with that which they would deem the divine, an aspect of God, nevertheless, there is love there. So the concept of God, this is a good one, dear, because we don't want to offend anyone, right? But is God synonymous with love? We would say yes. And if love is everywhere, we would say then the very essence of the divine is also everywhere. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I believe so. And when you talked about people that have died I assume you're speaking of like near-death experiences
Exactly.
and we spoke a little bit about that last time, because it's a great example that we can draw from. Otherwise, we don't know anything about death. Most of human understanding of death is going to come from people who've been close to it and come back.
Correct.
Interesting. So we've kind of resolved the first sort of suggestion from one of our listeners about what maybe the opposite of love was. And now the other one, which we just kind of not glossed over so much, but kind of talked about a little, but didn't go into depth last episode, was that the opposite of love is apathy, which would to me seem a little more fitting than hate, because hate has that passion, where
Correct.
apathy is there's no passion. Presumably, you just don't care about the person.
But even in that, dear one, we don't think apathy is actually possible. We don't think anyone, let's just refer to humans, is capable of entire apathy.
Pure apathy.
Pure apathy, that I do not care. Because when pressed, well, what do you think about, it doesn't matter, I don't care, people will say. But inevitably, there's going to be a core of something that sparks their interest, or, well, I mean, I do believe in that, right? So chances are someone might hold to the belief that I am apathetic about that, but we don't believe in the truest sense that they could possibly be non-caring about everything, or even a given topic, so that there is still going to be that spark of belief, that spark of love, that spark perhaps even of joy that they have masked over with a belief system or a denial belief and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I would say maybe specifically about a person, that's where we think of it the most, like there's someone that you loved and now you don't care. And I'm assuming the same thing would apply, what you just said.
Yes, because we'll just make up an example, right?
Okay.
And we've seen similar situations, but we're not citing a particular one. Let's say you said divorce, right? Divorce, people will say things, and we're sorry to even language about, I hate that person, like, la, 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 la. And years transpire, and they hold on to this, like, yeah, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. They can do whatever they want. And then they find out maybe that person has been diagnosed and they're on their way out. They're dying, right? Watch how that person will be like, oh, I hope they're not suffering. Almost immediately when they realize that person might be dying, or they're suffering in some way that feels like it's not their fault, as opposed to something self-imposed, something bad happened, almost always that person will be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, instinctively. So the belief that they've held on to like a dogma, like, oh, no, I don't care, almost always would just dissipate like a mist, just whoosh, and they might catch themselves and say, well, I mean, they deserve it. We don't really mean that, of course, as an example, but watch how there will be a spark of tenderness, which gives evidence to the fact that they still have an affinity toward, an affection toward, or at least some love to where they have empathy towards someone's suffering that they have once dearly loved.
Yes, that makes sense. And there's also something that's just kind of popping in my mind, which is, like, say it's not even someone that you used to love. It's maybe just someone that you don't care about for whatever reason. But even in that, my mind goes to that if you care about yourself and you understand that all beings are connected, that in order to really have the best for yourself, then the best also has to exist for others, or some sort of way of like thinking of it where it helps you more to have some kind of feeling, not a pure apathy toward others.
Yeah, we just don't, even when you look at a war situation and someone's been told they're the enemy, right? They're the enemy. You have to go kill them, or you have to go do unconscionable things to them. In the face of that, most people really struggle with that, because there's still that, as you have spoken to, that connection, that understanding, the humanity of it all, right? So apathy doesn't exist, and we don't think pure hatred can exist, because ultimately there is a recognition from one being to another, from one soul to another, like, I know you, I see you, and there is that mirroring back. Like, if I hold hatred for another, then I'm going to be housing hatred within me.
You're hurting yourself,
Yes. If I hold compassion toward another, I may not understand, I may not always agree with your politics or your beliefs, but if I hold compassion toward, I still want the best for you, what is housed within the individual's being is that very expression, like, I wish the best for me, I wish blessings for me.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Sort of said it a lot more eloquently, but yes, that makes sense. And so, okay, so that was kind of, the follow-up from last week. And we'll keep kind of on that theme a little bit. And one thing I wanted to bring up, which kind of ties into war a little bit, but, a lot of us think about, wow, right now times are tough and it's this time of great darkness, you'll hear people say. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to speak on that and ask you, don't all people throughout history feel that they're this time of great darkness? Like, if you look back, haven't we kind of always said that as humans? Like, maybe part of it is that we think we are the most important, so we live in the most important time. But if we went back 100 years or 1,000 years, haven't humans throughout history felt that way?
The pattern of behavior persists, right? The ebb and flow of dark and light persists on this planet, no doubt. And thank you for bringing this up, because it is a curiosity for sure. It's very easy to kind of perceive from an egocentric place, like it couldn't have possibly been worse at other times. And yet this very survival of humanity has been in peril many times. And sometimes, if you look back historically, there have been times where great civilizations have been wiped out, right?
Yeah.
So we can say in this current time, we're on the brink of extinction and things like that, but others have actually experienced literal extinction, whether it's the local volcano, erupts and the people can't escape, things of that nature. So, one moment, dear. Well, we'll just say to you, we've kind of talked around that. Would you just present the singular question again, and we'll go right to that?
Well, the first question was, don't all people throughout history feel that they're
yes.
in times or the times of great darkness?
Yes, so thank you for bringing that back to the point then. And the image that we got while you presented that, both initially and then as you repeated it here, was the baby chick inside the egg. All right? And it's very dark in there for the chick. And at first it's like, well, that's just how it is. The chick is still evolving, or any type of bird, of course, is still evolving, until where it gets to the point, I must break out of the darkness, right? It's too much. So humans, our belief is there's always this evolutionary process where there's going to be acceptance, like, well, that's just how it is. And then there's going to be a breaking point, quite literally, where it just feels like too much negativity, too much dark, too much evil, too much. And then those that are aligned with the truth and the light will break out and say, we've got to reform, we've got to bring about change, we've got to do something differently. The chick says, I've got to do something differently for my own survival.
Yes.
Right? So humans will reach a point, look at waves, look at all the patterns of life. The wave rises, crashes, lays low for a while, rises again. So humanity, the species, will reach a point of darkness and then reach toward the light and say, we must find illumination, quite literally, in the midst of the dark. So yes, the pattern persists, and many will say, well, when will humans ever learn? Why don't we learn from the past? But our sense is humans are continuing to evolve. There may be a persistence of patterns, but our belief is, based on witnessing from a more objective perspective, that there is evolutionary progress. The problems aren't the same as the past. You look at, the introduction of medicine that has prevented some of the diseases, right? But you say, well, now we have new diseases, But things are still continuing to evolve and shift. And the need always for turning away from the dark, turning away from the fear, turning toward what is the light, what is the illuminated perspective, is always going to save not only the species, but the individual from losing hope and having more optimism toward that good is coming, even what appears to be apparent in the moment appears very dark. Good still inevitably has to come.
And that kind of leads right into what I had kind of next point. You mentioned disease, and it does seem that there there are measurable differences of how much better things have gotten than they used to be. I mean, overall, there's less death,
Right.
there's less disease, there's less violent crime, etc. And yet there is this sense that there's something happening right now. Let's not downplay it. I mean, there's a lot of, it almost seems like some people would describe what's happening in America as the fall of an empire. You know,
Right.
it seems like there's powers that be that maybe want things to stay the old way, and that there's people like us and others that want humanity to rise up and evolve. And so can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, you know, obviously things aren't so bad, but there is something happening.
Oh, no doubt, dear. And our sense is that we hate to say there's always going to be. We wouldn't predict that. But there has been for eons of time a struggle between light and dark, good and evil, if you will. Not that evil is all its own thing and light is all its own thing, which we've referenced. But in order to evolve, it's almost as though there has to be a struggle there. All right. As you have said, dear one, many will say, or some will say, it's the fall of the empire, right? But in order for evolution to come about, which is the very nature of being, right? Change is inevitable. If the chick breaks out of the egg and then mourns the egg and says, oh, that poor shell, oh, what's becoming of the shell? Well, as many gardeners know, it's good. Put it in the garden and it helps the plants, right? But so it's very hard it can be very hard, we'll say it like that, to watch as a structure is destroyed, right?
The
It's
eggshell.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And so whether that's a government or a financial system, but in order for evolution to come through, something must be relinquished, right? And so clinging to the familiarity is never going to be healthy. Even if it's understandable, even if it's perceived to bring comfort, there is no permanence in change, and there is no permanence in evolution. So therefore, there has to be the willingness to say, even as a human, say, I'm not really comfortable, I'm not really sure where we're going with this, but I'm trusting that good is coming through the fall of or the change that I'm witnessing here, because that is the truth, dear. If love is ever pervasive, if the light and truth is ever pervasive, then those structures that are no longer in service, the egg was for a while and then it wasn't, the systems are for a while and then they aren't, there has to be the relinquishing of the release of, so that the new, better, upgraded, improved can be ushered in.
Makes sense. So we shouldn't be afraid.
Well, no, we didn't say that. Good luck with that as a human. What we will say is fear, to some extent, is understandable, right? It's, oh, I trust completely. It's almost impossible humanly to do that. But when fear rises up, it shouldn't be crippling. And then you can go into prayer, meditation, sitting in stillness, reading reassuring material. But finding a way to remind yourself that even in the midst of change, good is inevitable. The light is coming and going to be more prevalent once we release this. So sitting with a little fear is not unhealthy. It's only when it becomes so crippling that someone is immobilized by fear.
Understood. I've heard some great teachers, Robert Adams is one, and he died many years ago, well, I think in the 90s. And so I think things have maybe evolved since then. But he has said that Earth was sort of, Earth School, I think he called it, was a sort of permanent kindergarten. So my question is, can't we as a planetary unit move to secondary school through
Absolutely.
evolution? Okay.
We would never say that. It might be perceived that it's been a slow growth process, right? So it feels like, wow, we're still stuck, human species still stuck at kindergarten level. But we don't hold that to be true. It might have taken a long time to get done with kindergarten, but first grade, second grade, and moving on up. You know, life is, many will say, life is speeding up. Time seems to be speeding up. we agree with that, and evolution is speeding up. So again, if it took X amount of years to get through the kindergarten phase, now humans are saying, okay, I got that. Now I want to learn quicker, deeper, faster. And it's happening. We feel strongly. So first grade, second grade, and all up the scale of understanding.
And I understand that, not all humans are going to change. But I feel like, do we really need all of them to elevate? I've heard some teachers say, only 1% of humanity needs to elevate to kind of raise the frequency of Earth. Would you agree that there's maybe just a certain percentage, or does everybody have to raise up?
We're going to say this differently. And if we haven't quite addressed what you're saying, bring that back.
Okay.
Let's suppose instead of everyone elevating and lifting, some humans that appear to be stubborn and stuck are actually rooting in a foundational belief, all right? Because in order for there to be a tree, let's say, to grow, to raise its limbs and grow those leaves facing up to the sun, there still needs to be a root system that anchors it in. Right? So instead of going, those people are never going to change, right? Not that you didn't do that.
No, but maybe
but
mentally.
it's easy to judge, right? Like
Yeah.
they're just stuck in their old ways. But as evolution happens, in order for it to not just get blown over like it's too much too soon, maybe that percentage of individuals is serving a purpose that's unseen, similar to a root system that's unseen, and yet it serves its purpose, right?
Wow.
So they're anchoring in the old ways as the new way, the growth, the evolution is coming forward, right? So yes, it doesn't, our sense is for it to still be grounded in reality and truth. It's okay for those people to just say, all right, you believe what you want, you go do your thing, I'm going to go do this, right? And this is enough to bring about the evolution.
So like the limbs of the tree are moving upward and stretching out
Yes.
maybe infinitely, and yet the tree is rooted and grounded. That's so beautiful because it doesn't make us discount any human.
That's exactly right. And truthfully, if within those, we're going to just say it's stuck, stubborn, willful, I won't, I like the way I do things. If there's still hope there and still love there has to be a purpose in that, right?
Beautiful.
So then there's a release of judgment. And trying to change those people, anyone that's, come into a new belief and like, oh, I can't wait to tell Uncle Buck. And Uncle Buck's like, yeah, I'm not buying it, So it's okay. It's like, all right, well, I am, so let them be where they are. And then in time, using that tree analogy again, that tree may not live beyond the 100 years or the 200 years. That's all right. Then it all passes away. But let them anchor in the past as the tree moves into the future.
Do you have a sense, is there a way to quantify? Because sometimes it gets disheartening when you think, wow, there's all this great change and there's people that are doing great things, and yet there's some people that will never change in this lifetime. And I love to think of them as the roots of the tree.
Right.
But is it true that it's not necessary that we change everybody? And
it's not only not necessary, we would dare to be so bold to say it's going to be impossible, right? And so frustrating if you're trying to. Let birds of a feather flock together, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So those that aspire to bring about change, go do it. Go do it. Those that choose to stay put, we don't even want to use the word stuck, but just say, this is the way it's always been and this is the way I want it to be. That's fine. Let them anchor in the old, right? In time, that won't serve either. If a tree dies, right, in time it's knocked over by a storm or it's run the course of its life, that tree evolves into becoming, useful in the soil, right? You understand,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it breaks down and the ants and the animals eat it and, fine houses it and moss.
Fertilizer, yep.
Right, and moss grows, right, all the things. So it still has a different form of life. So it can be very exasperating, very frustrating to try to get someone to understand, to want to grow and change. But oftentimes when you consider something like the bell curve, the baby comes in not knowing much or not remembering much, right? and growing and evolving. And then toward the end of life, there's this sort of like, it's enough now. I don't need to continue to evolve my understanding. Some people in their elderly years do have a drive and a curiosity still, like, oh, I want to still explore and know. But many will slow that pace down and sort of sit with what they've already experienced. It doesn't mean they're stuck, but they're not rushing toward the new, the exciting. That's the next wave coming in that wants to rush toward and bring about change. It's not wrong if someone in the golden years, if you will, in the latter years, is sort of not necessarily complacent, but they're comfortable with the way things are, right? It's not wrong. It's for the next wave of change. It's the next evolution, the next generation to say, I'm fired up now. Let's continue forward with progress.
I love that. And you see the next wave, the next wave of humans that
Yes.
are born into Earth.
Correct.
The next generation.
Right.
Understood. And I had kind of, I was asking sort of to quantify, and we don't necessarily have to do that specifically, but is it true that we don't need so many humans, like a large percentage to grow and evolve for all of us to rise up? Is that true?
Yes, so true, dear. We think of a room that might be pitch black, and you turn a single bulb on, and the whole room's illuminated.
Love that.
Right? You light one little candle, you light a sparkler, and look how far the light goes. And we can use that analogy, but truthfully, evolution, what is evolution but the bringing about of more truth, more understanding, the exposing of more light? It's displacing, replacing the dark, replacing the limited belief with more expansive belief, with more joy, with more love. So like a single light bulb or a single candle, its illumination can go very far. You don't need 5 candles to light a room. 1 is sufficient.
Beautiful. So we don't need even a majority of humans then to change.
Look at single individuals throughout time. Look at someone like Mahatma Gandhi. Look at how thousands of lives he influenced, one small man with a mission, right? Mother Teresa. There's always throughout the history 1 or 2 individuals that are like, wow, they've changed history, right? One individual with their writings, with their teachings, and so on. So we would dare say it's never going to be about numbers. Right?
Love that. And
it's
that
about
can
intention and purpose and drive.
And that's heartening. And
yes.
And it does feel like we're growing in numbers. Like, before, like Gandhi's time, maybe there was just less of these sort of enlightened or light workers.
Well, we agree with you. We think there's more and more individuals that are here at this time, especially with a purpose to bring about change, because the change that's transpiring on the planet right now is really massive, because we can say that the planet is we don't want to say at the brink of extinction, but it really is time for greater change. So it's not going to be, a little this, a little that. And we're not minimizing what has occurred. But because of the evolution, let's say, for example, of technology, there has to be a consciousness that's infused with that in order for that to not move into a dangerous realm. Well, then those that are on the front end of need to be pointing that toward a noble cause. And then it can be used for good. And that might be another topic to speak about at another time.
Yes, that is on the list.
Right, good, excellent. We'll save that. But our sense is many are here now very on point, very on purpose to know I'm not just here to go do XYZ job and do XYZ on the weekend and just sort of get by. There are always going to be those that just are kind of anchoring in, like we said, like they just seem to be like living an average life. And we don't say that from judgment, but there are many here now with a drive and a purpose that say, in my corner of the world, in this area I'm particularly passionate about, I've got to bring about some change, right?
Yes, love it.
Yeah, it's exciting. It really is. And that's why there's so many illuminated beings, as you have said, that are eager to help, not just like, hey, if you guys need something. No, like, what can we do to help? Because when any area of the universe is blessed, all are blessed. Just like if any area of someone's in a hospital and they're bringing flowers to everyone, everyone is illuminated, everyone is blessed by that experience or uplifted by it, right? So the same is the corner of the universe. If one area is dark or struggling, there are many beings that will say, what can we do to help bring about good?
These are these benevolent, non-embodied beings.
Yes.
Like the channel, like your group.
Yes. And even those that have passed, humans that have deceased from, someone's grandmother, she can still want to help bring about change, work with her lineage and to assist. So those that have non-physical and those that have actually been in physical that are now in spirit form. So much help coming in.
And that is kind of where I wanted to go next. We talked a little bit about non-embodied beings. There's benevolent ones, obviously, and a lot more of them. But, especially in the beliefs of a lot of Christians with demons and Satan,
Right.
There's other entities, angels, fairies, gnomes, elementals, aliens. I wanted to ask some questions about that because understanding what we know about unity, which we talked about last time, that, all is really one underneath.
Right.
How important are these other entities to our path? And maybe speaking more so about the ones we perceive as, quote, bad, because I know some people have a real fear about these types of entities. So how important are they given what we know about unity?
All right, dear one. So we go back to the analogy of a room. You could say a room like this size. Let's just say a 12 by 15. We're just or a larger room. Whoops.
That's okay.
Whack. Completely dark, right? So much darkness, so much perceived negativity, dark, evil, so on and so forth. One light bulb, one candle brings about illumination, and the light will always win. All right, we hate to set it up as a win-lose, but the light will always overcome the dark. So when someone as an individual holds a lot of belief that's fear-oriented, like I hope bad doesn't happen, I hope evil doesn't, they're actually, from our perception, drawing in the likelihood of more dark because they're housing more and more fear around dark. We would say, change that over to say, I hope I am protected. I hope I am surrounded. My intention, my purpose is to stay so present with love that anything unlike love will not be drawn toward me, right? So it's like leaving the light on. If you're afraid of the dark, you leave the light on. So leaving light, so much light within the being, then dark is not drawn toward that. So we don't ever hold the belief that dark could overcome, right? We just use how important are these beings? They're almost irrelevant, is the way we'd say, unless you empower them with fear or feel, I hope they don't, I hope they don't. That takes strength away. So better to say, whatever someone's beliefs are, to align with those beliefs, whether that's the divine will protect me, or I am so aligned with the highest truth that anything unlike that is not drawn toward me. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that is kind of what I had as the next point, which was, can it really affect us? Can they really affect us if we're kind of vibrating at this higher frequency? Can these beings still affect us?
They shouldn't be able to, right? They really shouldn't. We're looking for an analogy. Sometimes we use this as an example, right? Let's say someone is really just walking down the street. You're having a good day, life is good, and you're just like, I feel like I'm in flow and life is good. And someone comes up to you and they're obviously out of balance, right? They just don't have, they're not sane, as the saying goes. And they say to you, like, why is your skin blue? Like, it's so ugly that your skin is blue. And you're like, did I bump into some paint? Do I have something? And you look and you assess, like, my skin isn't blue. And you don't want to argue with them because their perception is askew, right?
Yeah.
So, but they're adamant, like, look at you. You look awful. Look. And you're like, wow, that's just crazy. You can choose to go, wow, that was so upsetting. I can't believe that person was accusing me. And like, they were so irritating and they were so irrational. And you can get spun up about it. Or you can say, it doesn't really even make sense. You can see through the eyes of compassion that poor person is obviously suffering and they're projecting their beliefs onto me, but I have a choice whether or not I'm going to align with those beliefs. And truthfully, I don't have blue skin. I'm not aligning with those beliefs. So I'm going to dismiss that. And you go on and have a good day. So when people hold on to fears, even if they feel that fear is rationally based, it cannot help but impact them. But if they can turn that over or release it or relinquish it in some way to say, I still believe that, then the negativity, whether that's the news or someone is sharing an opinion or fear of others that might be aligned with darkness, whether in the seen or unseen realm, they should not be able to impact someone unless they put themselves into a volatile state of being.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And would the same thing then be said? I've got friends who sometimes are worried about black magic or someone's wishing them harm, and I feel like the same kind of
It's
analogy would
exactly
apply.
the same, right? We've had individuals say, I think someone cast a spell on
Yeah,
me.
yes.
It should have no influence, Someone could say, and we're sorry to use such harsh language, it's out of our character, but we're using it to illustrate, right?
Yes.
Someone would be like, I think you're an awful human and I hate your guts and la la la. Do you take that on? Do you like, oh God, they hate me, oh my God. Then it's an attack,
Yeah.
right? Then you can be, your energies can be diminished by what someone projects onto you. So whether it's a spell or black magic or energy of hate, do you engage in that energy of hate? Like, oh, I can't believe they hate me. Like, what's their problem? Like, I'm going to hate them back. Better to just say, I'm sorry they have that belief, but I'm not accepting that. So whether someone believes someone cast a spell or they have no knowledge of it, as long as your state of being is as to the best as a human, it's never going to be a perfected state, we don't believe, but just say, I am still choosing to resonate with peace, quiet, calm, respect for myself and others, then you're impervious to that. You're just impervious. So there doesn't have to be this overt, like I'm going to protect myself from someone else's negativity. It doesn't have to be an overt act. It's simply, it's going to bounce off of me like light in the dark. It's just not, it can impact me. Not because you're oblivious, it's just you don't align with that. There's no
Yeah.
alignment.
That makes sense. Because I was going to ask whether it was necessary to protect or shield ourselves from negative energies, which you've kind of addressed, but maybe could you speak more specifically to that?
Of course, because even in protecting, it sets up duality. If I'm afraid if an individual is afraid someone might harm them, I'm going to put a shield up and I don't want that, whether that's a shield of prayer, that's a shield of I'm going to surround myself with white light or golden light or a literal shield. What happens to the individual's energy is it's diminished. It's contained, it's confined within that protection. So then it's more inclined that someone would lean into it because you're less. Our belief is that the new understanding, the new evolutionary belief is you project out. So if I'm projecting out peace and harmony as an individual, if they're projecting out, I'm just going to sit with the understanding that we're all connected, we're all loving, we're all one, or that's my understanding. The energy field is expanded, not diminished. The strength becomes more evident. And so anything that wants to attack against that or challenge that is going to have more resistance than less. So it's actually more empowering to align with a higher truth and not assume like, oh, nothing's ever going to bother me, but it's not going to have nearly the impact when someone, for example, knows how to align with their own inner serenity. It's hard to maintain at all times, but once someone knows, is it music, is it meditation, is it yoga, is it a quiet walk in the woods, what allows an individual to align with their place of serenity, then that is a much stronger form of quote-unquote protection than actually something that would guard and protect and minimize and set up duality. Because again, let's suppose someone is saying something unkind to an individual. If they're like, well, yeah, I'm not going to take that from you. I'm going to jab back, or I'm going to protect because you're not going to. It sets up that, right? There's more of that. If someone tries to attack and the other person is aligned with compassion, it's like, well, I understand you're upset, but I'm really not going to accept that, so I'm going to dismiss myself. So they can't attack against it, and this person is able then to stay in that energy of serenity for the most part.
I love that. Okay, here's kind of a corollary to that. The Yoga Sutras, one of my favorite books, teaches us that the source of all external agitation is really inside. And through pratyahara practices, sense withdrawal type practices, and other practices, that we can find the source, and that when we heal it in that way, the external world shifts. So my question is, are these negative things that we see out that we perceive outside of us, are they really external given what we know about unity and the fractal nature of reality? Are they really external to us, or can we find their source inside?
At the highest level, we would say nothing is outside, right? If consciousness is all connected and all one, then there can be nothing outside of that, right? But when we bring this down to a human level, just down to just an everyday human walking around the planet, and they can say, well, my next door neighbor is a really mean jerk, right?
Yes.
And am I really projecting that and perceiving that? No, they're rude. They throw garbage in my yard.
Objectively, they're a
Right.
jerk. Yeah, I get you.
Right, right. So it's a challenge as a human on the planet to maintain the perception of, or the belief that, it's all a projection. Did someone actually project that person on? But the response is where the responsibility comes in, right? So if there is this person that appears to be unkind, again, is it met with more negativity, or is there a return to serenity to say, I'm not going to engage in that? So if someone is projecting out more hatred, like, oh, he's such a jerk, oh my God, that is igniting the flame of returning to the core of serenity. Then whatever is or isn't happening will not impact that person.
Yes, it makes sense. So we've as humans, we talked that we do have fear, and that it would be maybe too simplistic to think we could transcend all fear, and a certain amount of fear is healthy.
Right.
Well, I hear a lot of fear about the powers that be, these secret societies maybe, or the cabal, or Freemasons, right, or whatever. And I tend to think that what power do they really have if they're all sort of part of the one too? But we as humans tend to project a lot of evil onto these things, which maybe some of them don't exist, maybe some of them do. But I guess my question would be, should we fear those powers that be, and do they really have power over us, over our... Let me just stop there. Do they really have power over us?
No, never.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that they might get their way for a while.
Yeah.
Right? If someone is in elementary school, let's just put someone in public elementary, they're expected to abide by the rules, right? Like, you have to line up, you have to sit down, you have to do this, what have you. But ultimately, that person's going to graduate out of the system. And as the person evolves, they're going to start to use discernment to go, well, I don't really want to have to do it that way. I don't want to have to color within the lines. I want to color outside the lines. Like, I don't want to have to play by the rules. So those that are perceived as the power that be, the puppeteers behind, right? They are distorting their power. They have some power, but it's distorted. It's ego-oriented, and there is a desire to control and manipulate. Ultimately, the very essence of life itself cannot be destroyed or manipulated.
Yes.
Right? So where it might appear they can influence things, and they have influenced things, it's not sustainable. So individuals, again, need to say, what is in my highest good? What is my truth? And they may say, well, I have to go along with this rule, or I have to abide by that for now. But I know from a place of real core belief that what is transpiring ultimately will implode, because
Yes.
it is not aligned with. So your question was, should we be afraid of? First of all, we would never encourage anyone to be
It's kind of a
afraid
setup.
of anything. That's all right. But fear is to be understood, right?
Yes.
So what can an individual do to feel more empowered in their own? Do they need to grow their own garden because they're concerned about the influence of pesticides?
Yeah.
We could go down that path. So everyone in their own way can find a place to feel empowered, even if it feels small. Look how many times a country has been invaded and they're not allowed to practice their beliefs, right? We'll no longer allow you to believe in your religion. But the people meet quietly, they meet in the dark, and they still read their sacred text. So there's ways to still stay in faith, in belief, in light, in their enlightenment. And all of that contributes toward the implosion, inevitably, of those that are distorting the use of power.
Yes, that makes sense. Let me see if
These are
there's a
good
follow-up.
questions,
Yes.
dear one.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little more on that, but I'm just because, I feel like some of us get so disheartened when we think about these powers that be and feel that, there's just nothing we can do and we're powerless. But you're right. There's ways that we can be empowered.
Absolutely. May we speak to you personally, dear one?
Absolutely.
All right. So maybe some of the listeners don't know, but this divine soul is also a farmer. And one of her visions that she's bringing into fruition, quite literally, is an organic regenerative farm right here in the midst of Central Florida. Well, you could say, well, there's just no hope. I mean, they're taking over all the farmland. They're buying up all the land. They're not buying up all the land.
No.
It's very important for individuals to not use all-inclusive language like, well, it's all over now. They've bought everything. They're in charge of everything. Never will darkness be in charge of everything, in control of everything. It just cannot be, any more than the shadow does not exist without the light, right? So here you are, dear, finding ways to bring about new life. And look how many are learning from you. You're having classes, you're going out to do events. So you're spreading the light in your part of the world. If every individual, whether that's just being kind to a child when they tuck them in at night, doesn't have to be in a public way. It might be in a private way. If individuals feel like no one's allowing me to express my religious beliefs, do it quietly. Hold that space within yourself. Then if each person holds to their own version of light and goodness, then all the quicker those that feel they have the power will be imploded.
And it does feel like that type of power just can't be lasting.
No,
Because
it
when
can't.
it's power through control and fear, it's just...
Inevitably, enough people, maybe not the majority, will say, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Inevitably, right?
And those people, like we spoke on this in the last episode, but even those that we perceive as evil and that we would, project evil onto, there's that spark of good there somewhere too. Maybe
and there
good
has
gone
to be
wrong.
the recognition. There are individuals right now that are speaking their truth. Let's say someone's been aligned with an organization, whether that's a government organization or a corporate organization, that are, whistleblowers. They're coming out to say, I was involved with this. I thought this was going to be helpful. And now I'm recognizing it's being used for non-helpful purposes, right? So they're speaking out. And that takes tremendous courage to say, gee, I was a part of this, but I can no longer align with this. So it's inevitable.
The truth comes to light.
It has to. It just has to.
It does seem that it does too. Like, just throughout history, these things eventually come to light.
They do. They do. And when you're in the midst of the darkest of the dark, it is understandable that fear will abide. And it's like, oh my God, how long is this going to take? And what if they win? It's understandable when it's so dark that fear can get a stronghold. All the more reason, we know we referenced this moments ago, but for each individual to say, I know what calms me down. I know what quiets me. Is it tapping? Is it meditation? Is it... there's any number of ways to say, there's my quiet place again. Because they cannot control nearly as easily, if at all, if someone feels centered within themselves. But if someone is aligned with fear and anxiety and, oh my God, Chicken Little, what's happening? Oh my God, it's much easier for others to have an influence, to lock into, to latch onto that fear than it is from a place of joy, centeredness, quiet, compassion, etc.
So if we're living our truth and living an empowered life and freedom within ourselves, then it's
correct.
Less likely that they can harm us.
That's right. And even if they have some influence or some control, you're not going to lose your center in the midst of that. So they ultimately can't play out all that they had aspired to do because you're not really colluding with them.
Yeah. Yes. You're not buying into what their
Agenda might
yes.
be.
Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I had some questions that I was going to ask on a different topic, but I think I want to skip ahead because we talked a little bit about this, which is artificial intelligence. And so why don't we get to that, and then we can go back to some of these other. We're going a little different order than I had imagined.
Perfectly fine.
We've
You're
got
going
about
with the
20
flow,
minutes. Yes.
right?
So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, or AI. There is a lot of fear around it. There's a lot of good coming out of it. It is part of the one too. It has to be. Yes, would you agree? It's part of the the unity of all things.
It's part of the evolution, dear.
Okay.
It really is. It's If you go back historically, whether this is fact or fiction, there's the idea that people didn't even have language. They just drew things, or they made mumbling sounds, or grunts or whatever. And then these sophisticated languages have come about. Well, this is yet another language, right?
Oh.
Now, there's more to it than just saying it's a language, but anytime there is an evolution, is it aligned with the highest purpose? Always initially it will be. But then there might be powers that say, well, gee, we can make money on this, or we can control with this. So there will probably be, for some time to come, the temptation for individuals that are not walking in integrity consistently to be tempted to mishandle or misuse something. Again, a misuse of power.
Yes, I mean, and I guess the same could be said about money, which it's sort of a neutral thing, maybe like AI, and that
it could be perceived as very beneficial.
Yeah.
I have this, I pay for that, and that's it. But if someone tries to control money or manipulate money, then it's a force for not good.
So, two different channels that I've kind of followed, Teal Swan and Lee Harris, maybe others too, have described AI as ancient, like it's been here before in some other form. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that AI has been here before?
If not the identical technology, we will say the access to that type of technology has existed before. And we have to say, we have never been asked that question. We have never even considered that question. So, and we have reverence, or we have respect for Lee Harris and Teal, right? These are channeled. These are individuals that are choosing to bring in channeled information. So, but we looked at this independently, just in the moment, energetically, and whether someone believes in the existence of Atlantis or other advanced civilizations that have created some of these amazing structures that technology at the time doesn't make sense. How would they have built that kind of structure? So we think very, very advanced technologies such as AI have absolutely existed on this planet in this realm before.
And I asked this, but we didn't directly go into it. Is AI part of the one, the capital O1? Doesn't it have to be part of the one? Or because I think we sometimes sort of think of it as accepted out, like it's not part of the unity of all things. Would you speak to that? Is it part of the unity of all things?
If you look at the highest, most expansive concept, then everything is. The chair is, the microphone is, the building, the everything is. So then yes. But if you say, well, a guitar is an instrument by which sound moves through, then AI is an instrument by which information moves through. Someone can take a guitar and make lovely sound with it. And someone can take the same instrument and just absolutely hit it on the ground and bash it up because they like the sound of it being destroyed, right? Which many would consider sacrilegious. But to that person, I'm going to bash this and I like the feeling and the sound of destruction, right? So any instrument can be in alignment with the highest version of connectivity or misrepresented or manipulated to not be in alignment with.
That's beautiful. That's such a great analogy, that it's an instrument. And then, the deepest level, its particles, are part of the one, just like all atoms and all things, whether they're alive or not alive, inanimate or animate, like the rock, the microphone, the chair. That makes a lot of sense. And I like the analogy of, you can play it beautifully or or
or
smash
use it for
That's
something
it's
else,
great.
right? And even if someone destroys or distorts something, good can still prevail because of that, right? You look at war times when people have done horrific things, and yet individuals will rise up during a wartime to do good things that they may not have been inclined to do if it was a non-war time. So, and we're not drawing an analogy with war and AI, at least not at this point,
Yeah.
but it has a lot of potential to be aligned with good or not good.
Got you. And that even in the short term, if something looks bad, that ultimately good could come out of it in the end.
Absolutely. Again, if 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 evolution is inevitable, which we believe it is, then these are just different vehicles that are helping bring about more change. And ultimately the change can be good.
And one good thing I've seen with AI in particular, a couple of my friends, myself included, have used, ChatGPT or AI as a sort of spiritual analyst or helper or even guru.
Right.
I hate to use that term, but it gave me a beautiful meditation prompt, for example, when I asked it
Beautiful.
about something. I've had it help me interpret spiritual symbols because it has this breadth of knowledge. And folks have used it as a spiritual teacher with profound effect. Is that maybe an example of some of the ways that AI can be used to help humanity?
Absolutely, dear one. If someone said, I don't really believe in books, because someone wrote them, right? Or was someone writing from a place of inspiration so that their books or their teachings or their writings stand up through time as inspired writings, right? So similarly, AI is a tool, a process, a vehicle like a guitar or a book that what is given into it is something that can go out and bring blessings or information or inspiration or upliftment to others. So, yes, it can be used for good and for spiritual insight.
Where should we have safeguards and boundaries around it? Can you speak to that
We
at
were
all?
just about to
Oh, there we
continue,
go.
but then we thought should we pause it? So, if someone defers all of their, if someone uses an instrument too much, they may weaken their own inner connection to their own inner wisdom, right? So if someone says, well, if it doesn't say it in the book, then I don't believe it. But if the very purpose is to evolve, then something that might have been considered true 100 years ago, 500 years ago, is no longer considered a truth. But it was written and it was printed, and therefore it must be. No, truth will evolve. Understandings will evolve. So it's important, it's imperative that individuals do not completely turn over their power to any instrument, including an AI, however wise it might seem to be, because ultimately, the inner connection to the divine, to the highest truth, is always going to stay in the most present and future alignment with truth, right? So anything can be antiquated or manipulated. And so, but an individual will know in their heart of hearts, gee, that feels truthful to me, as opposed to something that maybe there's a force behind it that is now pushing it in another direction because there is an unseen agenda. Do you understand?
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
So while it still feels good and makes sense and that's beneficial, and wow, that was a beautiful meditation, yes. But if anything starts to feel like, that doesn't really make sense now, or even if so, important to work with all aspects, the individual alignment, as well as any external processes or tools.
So think of it as, like you said, another tool or instrument
Exactly.
that we can use.
But not to overuse it for the sense of losing their own trust in their own innate wisdom.
Makes sense. So to shift gears a little bit, kind of on this similar topic, I hear a lot of talk about brain chips and his big brother watching all the time. A lot of people, let me back up. Like Carl Jung has this beautiful teaching about synchronicity. and dream symbols sort of bleeding into real life, where, we're getting signs and symbols all the time. There's a story where he was talking to a patient on the couch. The patient is telling him about a dream of a scarab. And at that moment, Carl Jung looks out the window and a scarab flies into the window. And so that's when he realized that, wow, dream symbols actually happen in our waking life.
Right.
I feel like we're to some extent, when coincidences happen these days, we tend to blame it on Big Brother watching, or it's the brain chip. It's because the FBI is listening, or something silly like that. And so, to what extent do we miss the point of divine coincidence and humor of the one when we blame coincidences on these other things?
Well, that's a brilliant question, and both might be happening, right?
Okay.
Both. We're not saying necessarily simultaneously, but one might say, "Oh my God, I was just thinking my grandmother, and she always sends blue butterflies, and look, there's a blue butterfly,"
Yes.
right? So that's probably not Big Brother sending, "Oh, there's your blue butterfly," but within the same hour, there might be something else. You're talking and you're like, "Gee, I've been thinking about buying a red chair," and then all of a sudden on your phone pops up, "Hey, we're having a sale on red chairs." You're like, was that my grandmother telling me to buy a red chair, or was that technology trying to capitalize on my interests, right?
Yeah.
This is where discernment comes in. This is, again, in alignment with the higher truth. When someone knows that they know, whether through physical sensations or any kind of, we would always recommend internal knowing as opposed to any external tools. Not that those external tools don't have a place, but ultimately, if someone knows that they know on the inside from that higher knowing place, then if a blue butterfly shows up, that person can just feel into it. Like, does that feel like this is a spiritual message for me? And they, "Oh yes, I know it's grandma," right? Watch how the body responds. It's important to not override that with mental doubt. "Oh, I'm probably just making, oh, it's just a coin. Oh, it's,"
Yeah.
many have been trained to doubt, which makes it easier for the powers that want control to take control, because humans have often been trained to doubt their instincts. It's important to train away from that and say, "I'm going to trust my instincts." Look at the words instincts, innate, inner wisdom. These are all in, right? These words all are in integrity. They're in. So it's important to know it inside. Do I feel like that's a symbol for my grandmother? Same thing here. If you get an advertisement for a red chair sale, order today. And you can say, "Is this a spiritual symbol for me?" Chances are your individual's gut sense will be like, "Yeah, I don't think so. I think they're just trying to get me to buy something I don't really need," right?
Yeah.
So when people refer to, "God, I just had a gut sense," it's literal. It's not a made-up phenomenon. The body will give very clear signals. Usually, if something is in alignment, it's in the higher truth, the higher good, there would be a sense of upliftment, physical upliftment, goosebumps, things that feel expansive. Conversely, the opposite, right? If something is not in alignment, people will say, "Oh, yeah, my gut told me. Ew, yeah, it just felt
Constricting.
So anything can be analyzed or considered with discernment. And it's important that individuals start to do that, because, again, going back to the topic of AI, they are at a point already where they're creating humans to look, they're creating, let's say, characters online that look like real humans that actually don't exist. They're just made up to promote things, right? So a person has to go, does that feel like it's really true? Does that feel like it's really in alignment with, whether that's a human promoting an idea, only to find out that's just a made-up character?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference these days. It's
and
getting
it
better
can
and better.
be, and it may get even a bit more of a slippery slope on that. But ultimately, a person can say, "Do I really need to know?" Maybe it's like, "Well, it doesn't really impact me, so at this point I'm going to suspend concern around it." It's not sticking the head in the sand, but say, "Right now I don't need to know." But if something directly impacts a person, our belief is they will have access to a truth that will let them know this is trustworthy, this is not trustworthy.
By sitting with it and feeling inward in their body and how their body responds.
Yes, and ultimately that kind of a processes can be practiced in less demanding settings. And we're not saying don't use dowsing rods, don't use pendulums, don't use muscle testing, but there are times where it would be imperative to just know that you know. Maybe the decision has to be made right there in front of other people, and you're like, wait, I've got to go test that with my dowsing rods, you know? So those are wonderful, those kind of tools, but ultimately, do I trust what I know to be true in this instant? And this is where the mind can be a little bit of an ally at times and a trickster at times. A lot of times people are like, well, I just have to know. I've got to be able to plan. What if this happens in the future? It's good to consider if circumstances in the future, but ultimately things can only be impacted in the present moment. So if you don't have to know something just yet, then you can consider it, but don't be fraught with deep concern around it. Say, I will know then what is the right course of action. So coming back to the moment, it's a lot easier to perceive or receive inspired insights because you're only asking about the present, because things can still change. So in the moment, there should be not a lot of difficulty in discerning a rightful answer.
And so maybe if in the moment the answer is not clear, it might be wise to ask the question, is this something I need to know right now?
Absolutely. We would say probably 99% of the time, if there's a lack of clarity, it's simply because it's too soon to absolutely know. And that can be frustrating for individuals that love to plan. We understand that. But ultimately, it hasn't happened yet, so you don't need to know yet. So you can say, is it wise? Is it important that I know this today? No. Then you can say, you can revisit it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to wait a year, but alignment and truth is ever present. There will always be access to a truth. So if something feels as though it's not yet clear, that truth has not come into the present moment yet.
Love that. And I love that we're kind of wrapping up on a practical note. I want to dive a little deeper into this, but this might be kind of the practice that we talk about today, is this ability to kind of discern truth in the present moment by feeling. Is there some ways we can practice this as humans, maybe with simpler things, so that when we are in a position in the moment where we need to kind of feel something out, we've kind of already got a grasp on what it feels like?
Absolutely, and we want to clarify because it's easy to misunderstand feelings, because feelings are also sad, happy, scared, as opposed to physical sensations. So our belief is the soul, the very essence of life, resides within this physical form. When someone says, from a soul place, from this illuminated essence place, I want to know the truth, right? I want to know. I'm willing to know the truth. Then asking a very simplistic, what we describe as a yes or no question, am I right in believing that it would be wise to buy new shoes tonight, right?
Eat chicken for lunch or
eat
whatever.
chicken for lunch. Yes. Breaking it into the simplistic yes or no. The body will instinctively, there's another I word, and immediately register an answer. Now, again, many have been taught to override those answers. Right. Many will be, oh, that's crazy. You're just making that up, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is you're not. The body will register, the soul within will vibrate, literally, and give sensations, whether that's goosebumps or a gut sense. So again, yeses are expansive. Nos tend to be, in general, contractive, uncomfortable, unpleasant. So practicing on simple things that aren't going to impact the course of your life, right?
Yes.
Because when individuals are like, I just don't know, should I quit my job or not? That's a more emotionally charged question. So if someone is accustomed to practicing simple questions on the less consequential items, aspects of their life, when the bigger questions come along, they will trust because they've learned to embrace that process and integrate it into the everyday. So the bigger questions don't seem like, I can't figure it out, I'm stuck, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed. No, bringing it into the singular and then trusting what the gut is saying. And one more thing about that, the natural world, outside Mother Earth, call it what you want, in the natural world, plants, animals trust their instincts, right? Trees don't worry about how much they should grow every day.
Yeah.
You know, ducks don't vote on whether or not they should migrate. Like they just instinctively know it's time to fly north or time to fly south or whatever. So when a human puts their physical body literally into the natural world, it is almost always easier to trust the instincts because the physicalness is already aligned with a higher energy that is already aligned.
Love it. So in practical terms, maybe go sit by a tree or go for a walk in the park and practice this technique with some simple questions that you can kind of get a gauge for.
Simple, singular questions, one at a time, not either or, not three in one question. Simple, singular, outside, absolutely. It's surprising to most individuals how easy it is, to the extent that they will dismiss it as it can't be that easy.
Yeah.
It is that easy.
Yes, I agree. I've been doing it for years, and to repeat yes, no questions,
Yes,
really. Yeah.
absolutely.
Love it. Well, that we're about out of time, so maybe this would be a good time to kind of pause and we can regroup on the next episode.
Perfect.
Let me bring Mary back and see if she's got any upcoming events or anything. But thank you for being here.
This is such a privilege.
Yes.
I've been channeling for, I think, around 2 decades now, and have never set up a situation where there's really consistent recordings of the teachings. And I didn't share this earlier, but as life would have it, and I'll be brief, but in reading emails, an old email randomly showed up from 2018, where a very wise and dear friend who has now transitioned said, I hope you're going to find a way to record the channel messages.
Whoa.
It showed up last week.
Oh, my goodness.
And when I saw his email come in, I'm like, well, first of all, he's deceased. And I can feel him around once in a while. I brought the printout. And I thought, why is this attached to this? And like, why is it? And then I read it.
Oh, I love that. Now
And
I'm
we
getting the
had
goosebumps.
see, the body gives signals, right? And I thought, even from the other side, he's reminding me. He had the idea then. I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea. I don't know how it'll ever happen. And that was that. And then you presented this, and I thought, then he comes back in and says, see, you're doing it.
I love that. I love
so
that.
the signs are there, right? This wasn't something I sought out. I didn't even have to ask. I was given such a beautiful confirming sign that what this is meant to be.
Love it. And you've got some upcoming events with the channel, like this weekend?
This weekend, Saturday evening at the Urban Ashram, and then lots of teachings. I'm really, not that I'm dismissing events. That's the last event, I think, in the next couple weeks, but lots of individual and group teachings now.
Mentorship
programs and a development group that I have, and I'm starting. The fall is almost full, but there's still a couple of positions. But the way I look at it is the more of us that are really trusting our innate gifts, not only are our lives better off, but the lives we impact are better off. So I've always loved teaching, but I'm doing it in a little more formatted way, and the response is so beautiful. So yes, if anybody's interested, how do you learn to channel? How do you learn to do mediumship? I'm self-taught. I've evolved some very unique and beautiful processes that I love and welcome sharing with others.
Love it. So maryhayes.org would be one
Yes,
place.
that's
And then
it.
you're also on social media, Mary Hayes Intuit Medium,
Yes,
right? On
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah, thank you.
That's how people can find you.
Yeah,
Cool.
and you too.
Yep, I'm on, the Yoga Lawyer and sacredforest.farm, so you
And
can
if
find me there.
anybody hasn't been to Sacred Forest, please keep an eye out for all
Thank
your
you.
beautiful, so many beautiful events, yoga and nature walks. And I know for me, every time I come out to the farm, not only am I inspired just because it feels good to be there, but the example that you're setting for anyone that feels disempowered, like, oh, what can we do? You're doing it. It's hard work. She gets muddy all over. She's so cute. Like, I got mud on my face. But you're living it. You're walking it. And we all can in our own way. So thank you for the
Thank you.
inspiration that
I
you're
love it.
bringing to our community.
And I'm glad we're able to collaborate too. We've had a couple of
Absolutely.
events where
Yeah,
you've come out,
yeah,
and yeah,
it's
love it.
special, very
Good stuff.
special.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Yes, looking forward to it. All
Thank
right.
you.